But Jeffrey Booth, your book on the price of tomorrow seems to me to have been way before the pandemic, arguing that this was a global problem, that we have to embrace deflation. You're the ultimate iconoclast of any finance panel I've heard. And that in that context, everything's going to cost less. We have to embrace it. It changes society. AI is coming at us. What's the role of social programs, and do you favor a guaranteed livable income?
I think you're going to need social programs to make this transition, and I do favor support for social programs, but not pretending. Again, governments can't stop this with monetary policy. It's coming anyways. By not recognizing it, you make the problem worse. You just tax people. On the top, people think they got a gift, and then you have to tax them more for social programs. John Maynard Keynes wrote in his 1930s essay that we'd be working 13 hours right now. The reason why we haven't followed the progression of technology down is because we're on a hamster wheel, falling asset prices up, and both sides of government, and this is not their fault. Both sides are talking about the same system instead of a systematic change. And they're yelling at each other on both sides of the aisle, and it's creating more and more division through society out of that yelling because they're missing the fundamental point. Technology makes everything cheaper. We're asking the wrong question. How do we support more jobs? So even this, I just heard about the infrastructure projects. Awesome. Why infrastructure projects? Because you get a longer-term GDP gain, and they've always worked to get people back to work. And produce longer-term GDP gain because roads were faster, right? People would shorten their commute time, and you'd get a longer-term GDP gain. Today, the superhighways of the future are all digital, right? So the faster roads are the ones that we're on right now, Zoom, right? The faster roads, and so without recognizing that, the money is going to go into the wrong areas, and we're going to make the problem worse.
I think you provided a very unique and interesting perspective. For the last several years, opinion leaders and bankers and government leaders have been telling us that the way to prosperity is through debt-financed consumption. Last week, we had an embarrassing testimony from the governor of the Bank of Canada, thankfully the outgoing governor. He is, as you might know, supported an unprecedented engorgement of debt-fueled consumption during his time as governor, and encouraged governments to take on more debt in so-called good times, which runs counter to the Keynesian theory that you pay off debt in the good times to prepare for to have surpluses in the good times, and then buffer yourself against the bad times. And I asked the governor if he could tell us what was the total debt of Canadian households, businesses, and governments in Canada. And he didn't know, which I found astounding for someone who, in his position, who's basically the top banker. You'd think he would know.
Really sorry to interrupt here, Mr. Poilievre. I think that the sound is not loud enough for the interpreters. I don't know if you can speak closer to your mic. Sorry about this.
All right. So I just found it astounding that someone who's supposed to be our top banker wouldn't know how much debt we have. It turns out that it's over $7 trillion, which is 3.5 times the size of our economy, and that was before COVID-19. Mr. Booth, do you think that now that the Bank of Canada is pumping over $300 billion of newly created money into our system, do you think that the Bank of Canada should be audited by the Auditor General when all of this is over to find out who benefited and who suffered as a result of the bank's decisions?
So I point this out because this is the same thing that happens in every company facing a structural change, right? It's logical that governments would be caught in the same loop. And so I don't have an exact suggestion on your question, should they be audited? But what I would say is it's going to be hard to understand that if you understand all the connections to what's actually happening. It's a structural break, and nothing that governments do by playing the old rules will solve it. And so it's easy to point fingers and everything else, but the best businesses do the exact same thing. When dealing with a structural break, they can't see that structural break and build to the future. They keep building to the past. So if you looked at all the economic models going back through history, they've never dealt with what we're dealing with going forward. So it's logical to think everybody that's sitting on top of that is sitting on top of the same problem. And all of the advice that people are getting is sitting on top of the same problem. So my recommendation, if I had a stronger recommendation, I would put together a group of people that can see where this is going into the future, different thinking, that can help the transition, because pointing fingers at the past, that's already done. It won't solve it. We need to think about how do we use this as an opportunity to build a better future for Canadians.
Down. We'll again hear the same voices telling us that we need to borrow more in order to consume more. But that's the problem that we're in now. We have the second highest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 when you take total debt as a share of our economy. Only Japan is worse. Even France and Italy, which have almost collapsed under their debt, have lower total debt to GDP than does Canada. And yet, when we come out of this, I guarantee you there will be those voices who say the only way forward is to pile more debt on the backs of our businesses, taxpayers, and consumers in order to, quote unquote, get the economy going. What that will actually do is make us more vulnerable for eventual rises in interest rates, which will impose incredible costs, unsustainable costs on our economy. So what would you say to those who are continually advocating debt as the solution to all of our problems?
It's worse than you think, is what I would say. It's because that additional debt is driving up asset prices to stratospheric levels, which is driving the break in our societies. And there's a whole bunch of people sitting on both sides of those. The people that have been enriched by that don't know that they've been enriched by that. And so they think it's because of ingenuity. And it's mostly because asset prices were artificially raised. And then the government has to step in on the other side and protect all the people that we're driving into the ground through the same solutions. So what I repeat what I would say. I would say that this takes different thinking. Just like an entrepreneur doesn't go and build the exact same business. They think about where is that business going, and why Netflix is built and Blockbuster is destroyed is the same function. They don't go and build on top. And so there's a whole bunch of people sitting around the table getting advice. And I have tremendous empathy for a lot of the people asking for money right now on this call, because people are hurting. And if we don't do that, there's going to be more pain. But if we just paper over this, it is going to explode, and you're going to drive society to the breaking point.
Okay, we will have to end it there.